Good evening, all. It's Svara Krasniansky from Adai Ad, and we're doing the next episode in our series, Ready for Marriage. And this question comes up a lot about addictions and marriage, and I'm so grateful to Rabbi Dr. Benzion Twerski for joining us on this important talk. I want to thank Mask, Ruchama Klapman of Mask, for being part of this. And once again, I feel so blessed to be working with her on this project. Adai Ad was set up for successful marriage and strong relationships, and we're talking about setting up, getting into the right relationship, gets from a position of strength. And so this early marriage dating series is so important. I want to introduce Rabbi Dr. Benzion Twerski, and I'm really grateful that you are able to join us on this important topic. Dr. Twerski holds a PhD in psychology from the University of Pittsburgh, and he lives in Brooklyn, where he consults to clients in private practice. He's an active in Shalom Bayis work and youth at risk, and has been affiliated with Mask since its inception 25 years ago. He facilitates a weekly parenting support group, and he's also teaching faculty at Twerski Coaching and Counseling Institute, training Askanim Rabbanim, Chassan and Kala teachers in their roles in guiding couples with issues in Shalom Bayis. He also regularly interacts with Batei Din and Dayanim, attorneys and courts, to help resolve conflicts to the benefits of both parties and their children. He consults to schools and mechanchim, and he's a resource for addiction treatment and referral. He's active in many community projects and is involved in personal safety, chinuch, and family relationships. And so that's why I'm so grateful that you're here with us today to talk about this important topic. So let's just jump in. When we talk about addictions, what are we talking about in this conversation, and what are we not going to go into? And then it's all yours.
There's two parts to the answer to this. First of all, we need to define addiction. And the second thing we need to talk about are what the addictions are. Like, we all know about alcohol addiction, about drug addiction. Let's first start with the definition of addiction. If you encounter that somebody used whatever drug it was once, or got drunk on Purim, would you refer to that individual as an addict? And the answer is categorically no. Addiction and a single use of a substance, I'm not saying that it's okay for them to have used it, but it certainly has no bearing on whether or not the person is an addict. When we're referring to addiction, referring to something which is a pervasive behavior and a chelik of what that individual does and how the individual lives. So addiction is, when we're talking about addiction, we're talking about something that is one of the aspects of a person's being that controls their character and everything that the person does. Some of the addictions that we talk about, and virtually all the professionals in the addiction field deal with all or most of them. And there's a couple of exceptions, and we should know what they are as well, because those are the things that you really have to look for somebody who specializes in it. The common addictions are substance addictions, such as drugs and alcohol. There are process addictions that they talk about, and the common ones are gambling and things of that sort. There are sexual addictions that we will not discuss tonight because it will not fit into our time frame. It is a way longer discussion, and it's far more complex. There are many other issues that come up with the sexual addictions. And the other one that I'm going to kick the can down the road and not discuss tonight is eating disorders. While they are addictions, the eating disorders are addictions, whether it's anorexia or bulimia or stom overeating. There are many other issues that come into play with eating disorders that's going to completely complicate everything if we're going to go there. So that really needs to be a discussion all of its own. And people who are looking for treatment or evaluation in any of those areas, look for somebody who has some specialization in it. So we will talk about the substance addictions. We can talk about gambling as well, and be aware that in the frum community, as far as we can tell, the incidence is not different or less than it is in the outside non-Jewish community. As far as we know, if the number that you're reading is 10% of people are addicted to drugs or alcohol, that goes for the frum community as well. And the same for gambling. I'm not sure what all those numbers are because the actual research keeps on changing, but I will tell you that the frum community is not immune in any way to any of these kind of problems. The issue with addiction, and the reason we're referring to it as addiction as opposed to substance abuse. Substance abuse is using a substance that is not being used for its necessary purpose. So let's take a common pain medication, Percocet, Vicodin. These are wonderful medications, terrific medications. Doctors prescribe them all the time, but they're there to treat pain that is due to a specific cause that they know what's causing the pain. And it's used for a limited amount of time because chemicals like this can quickly become habit forming and the person begins to need them whether they're experiencing the pain or not. And if they don't, they're going to begin to feel sick. So the person becomes dependent on it. And many of the street drugs do pretty much the same thing. Now, maybe there's a pleasant experience to it, but we don't always have to walk around having pleasure. We have to walk around fulfilling our lives and doing what it is that we need to do. And addictions are that pervasive that they completely get control. It's a progressive disease, so it may not begin that way, but it gets that way to where it begins to take over the person's life completely. Now, let's now touch on the subject of addiction within a relationship. Okay, so I'm aware that we're talking to a population that the focus is on dating or pre-dating. We can even talk we have the same thing to say about people who are already married and in a committed relationship. The thing that happens with an addiction is that it begins to occupy a part of the person's being. Now, if you want to map out a profile drawing of a human head, here's the forehead, and here's the nose and the chin, and you're going to mark off a space for the brain on top. Now, if you could figuratively just draw boxes in there and say, okay, these are the different functions that the brain has. Well, the brain is pretty much needed to do all the things, to manage all the things that we do. It's the master switchboard. So it's there to take care of our ability to think and our ability to feel and all the muscle movements of the body, which can be quite complex. Then, if you want to say, you know what, let's take these two boxes and let's just block them out. And these are being blocked out by something that is figuratively taking control over this space of the human brain. Now, I'm making it sound as if it's biological. There is plenty of biology to the addictions to drugs and alcohol. We're not going into the detail of that. This is not a college class, but just think of it as a muscle where you've got 2 out of the 15 blocks of the brain are now in charge of one function only, and that is the use of the drug. Alcohol is a drug. Now we have a different problem. Now we have that not only are 2 parts of the brain taken up by that, but the rest of the brain is now being commissioned to do all the other tasks that these 2 are supposed to do. And again, this is only figuratively. This is not literally what happens. But if you think about it, now a part of the brain, right, again, not biological, but part of the brain has to be dedicated to maintaining the relationship. And that relationship requires how they interact and what they do and what they don't do, and the different roles that they take, and their involvement of emotional connection. Guess what? Alcohol or the drug has just taken up that space. And these functions become no longer available to the individual. Now, let me say that from a different angle. I'm going to just reference something that I said in a workshop on marriage some time ago. And we were talking about what some of the pivotal parts of marriage are. And one of them was that your spouse must be number one in your life. In other words, I can be sitting here at my desk. My wife is a block away from here, and she is number one in my life, not any other member of the human race. And anything that I'm going to do, that I need to do, right? She has to be part of the calculation of what I do and how I do it. Now, physically, she's not here. She's on the next block. But I still have to lead my life as if she is here. That's what's demanded of me. Now, let's say that I'm going to develop some sort of an issue where something else is going to become more important to me, that I'm going to be my nefesh for that, and that's going to be number one in my life. Right? Playing on my computer. If that's going to become number one in my life, my marriage is going to suffer. I can't tell you what's going to happen. What I can tell you is that if I'm not able to invest myself in it, in the marriage completely, that my spouse is number one because something else has become number one, we got a problem. So let's go back to dating again. Okay, so here we have a couple that is considering dating, and we're collecting information, and we make a discovery that one or the other, the boy or the girl, as far as I'm concerned, these are equal rights issues, and you're not going to find more or less among the men and among the women. That either one of them is a drug user or goes out and drinks on a frequent basis. Now, without a diagnosis on the person who's drinking or drugging, I may not know that. I may not know if the person is actually addicted. But I sure want to know, to what degree is this drinking or drugging going on? Now, the illicit drugs carries other issues with it that I would be rather scared about. But what's most relevant here is that if there is a chemical that is now occupying part of the person's character, there's no room there for me. Because if it's part of the character, they're going to be busy. Part of their brain is always, I have to know that I can get my stuff when I need it, where I need it. And that's going to take precedence to any of the other responsibilities in life. Now, will it start off that way? No, but it can get that way. And since all these addictions are progressive diseases, that's what happens. I can relate story after story. I used to bring a recovering compulsive gambler into my substance abuse group. He had about 7 years clean from gambling. And he would be doing anything in the world to make sure that he could get his bets in where he needed to get them. Now, his form of gambling was sports betting. And he had a bookie that he would go to and he would place his bets. And if he would win, he would get money. If he would lose money. And gamblers always lose. So here he is being about $50-some thousand in the hole. And this is a story that goes back 25, 30 years. he's in the hole by 55 grand, and he's about to. This is an Italian guy. He's about to propose to his girlfriend, and he realized when he was with her that he hadn't called in his bets to the bookie yet, and in about an hour and a half is when college football starts, and his bets aren't in yet. He had to get away from her so that he could make the phone call. This predates the cell phones, mind you. He had to get to a payphone. So wherever he was going with her, she would have been there with him. So they went to a store to buy something, and he pushed it away so that it didn't go past the cashier. And now he had an excuse to go back to get to get that item, right? So he went back to the store, but he didn't go into the store. He went to the payphone, and he called in his bets, and he got them in like mamish a moment before the betting closed. And he came back without the item. And that's when he basically exposed himself that he was a compulsive gambler. And he's not getting married to this woman with $55,000 of debt, was supposed to accept him that way. The bottom line is, these addictions take over the person's life. Now, if you're going to, somebody will connect you for shidduch with an individual that's gambling, that's drinking, that's drugging. I can't tell you it's a bad shidduch because I don't know that, right? But I can tell you that you got some serious questions to ask, and you really have to get verification that this is a person who is able to get into a marriage without a problem that's going to progress to become something worse than it is. Now, I have to add something very, very important. And I'm basing this, it's only Monday, and I'm basing this on people that I have dealt with clinically in my office just in the last 2 days. Okay. There are people who had addiction problems that were very serious, and they got into treatment and recovery. And recovery means not only have they done the therapy and got to the therapist or rehab or outpatient program or what have you, but they've also maintained a support system of people who have been there, done that. For alcoholics, there's Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a 12-step program. For drugs, there's Narcotics Anonymous, NA, and for gamblers, there's GA. There's all the whole alphabet soup. And they have a sponsor who's their mentor who guides them through the program. They've been there and have accumulated years of recovery themselves. What recovery does for an individual is an absolutely amazing process. It's a complete metamorphosis of somebody's character to becoming somebody who's precious, the kind of midas that we talk about, right? The truly recovering person has them. They've accomplished, they've grown into a world where these are the things that dominate their life. And somebody who's truly in recovery, I say, grab him or grab her. These are golden opportunities because they are somebody, they've been through the college of hard knocks. They've been through the difficulties. They've emerged from them with the willingness to overhaul their character, to overhaul their personality, and to change the way that they deal with themselves and deal with the outside world. They've addressed their issues of self-esteem. They've addressed their issues of defects of character. Human beings are, by definition, an imperfect creature. So that, all of the entire animal kingdom, you have little baby animals, they're born, and they just get bigger. They don't get better. So your little horse becomes a big horse, your little alligator becomes a big alligator. They don't become better alligators or better horses, they just become bigger. And because there's no such thing as changing. the human being has the ability to grow. So we start off being imperfect because Baruch Hu made us that way. And then he says, now you spend your existence, your life on this planet working to achieve something closer to perfection. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. And the recovering person has engaged in a very, very intense process to be able to get there. Now, I can go into a long presentation on the 12 steps, but I'd rather just summarize the steps into the first couple of steps, deal with the fact that I know that I can't do it myself, and a power greater than me can bring me to a place of greater sanity. And I have made that connection to turn my life and my will over to that higher power. Now, we define higher power. How many Shemas do we have? Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, the Eibishter. We have all these different labels, right? And we're all referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps us. He put us here. He didn't put us here. He didn't just toss us in the ocean and say, sink, swim. He's here helping us all the time. But he helps us when we reach out to him and we connect. Ata Naisen Yad L'Pashin, we say on Yom Kippur in Ne'ilah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu stretches out his hand to us, but it's on us to stretch our hand up and to grab hold of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand. He's offering it to us. What the addicted person does is says, it starts off, I know that I can't control the addiction myself. To the degree that I will be able to stop it is because I'm going to hold on for forces greater than myself. The next part of the program is turning it into, okay, let me examine what about me leads me to try to engage in a behavior that's taking control of my life. Now, you know what? There's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine. But if the glass of wine is having me, we got a problem. It's a very big difference. And if that glass of wine will own me, and it's going to determine how I'm going to behave and what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go, that's not a healthy life. And that's the kind of thing that we want to make sure that we don't get trapped into. However, if the person has been there and now they've changed their life to where they've taken over, they've retrieved the control over their behavior, over how they live, what they feel, how they feel. They make decisions that are not based on what they want in life, and not what the bottle of liquor wants, or what the lottery ticket wants, or what the racetrack wants. They're taking over control, so that they're now saying, okay, me and God, we're going to handle this, right? And by the way, God is not your co-pilot. You're the co-pilot. So if somebody has gotten into solid recovery, you'll be able to see it. The person's not going to be conceited. They're not going to be bashing themselves. They're going to be in the middle where they belong. You're going to find somebody who is aware of their weaknesses. AA doesn't like to call it weaknesses areas of powerlessness. They know that if it's somebody with a drug or alcohol problem, I cannot drink. I'm not going to find an excuse I could just have a little bit. AA has brilliant slogans. And one of the slogans is, one is too many, 1,000 is never enough, right? The alcoholic knows they cannot find an excuse to have a single sip of wine. Why? Because they go over the deep end with it. They don't have that control. And the way that they get control over their lives is they eliminate it, and they don't use it at all. Now, bears mentioning that quite some years ago, one of the researchers in the addiction field was quite a renowned professional, a fellow by the name of Dr. Alan Marlatt, who was a psychiatrist. And Alan Marlatt and a team of other researchers decided to create an alternative support group for recovering alcoholics. And the idea was, can they ever get back into safe, moderate drinking? And they created a group called Moderation Management. And they had meetings and whatever. And the first rule in was for an entire 6 months, no drinking at all. And after that, they can have 1 drink a week, 2 drinks a week, whatever it was. And it's supposed to have been that, once you broke the pattern, now you can go back to drinking in moderation. The success rate that they had was notoriously poor. It was an item that made it into the national news that the president of had gone back to regular drinking as in the olden days, and was in a drunk driving accident where she killed somebody. This is the director of the organization. The point is, they need to be able to take on abstinence, and the abstinence has no excuses. It's not 99.44% pure; it's 100% pure. Once it's contaminated, nobody knows where it's going to go after that. So we simply don't take chances on that. Be aware that addiction is a disease, and it's a disease that if we maintain recovery at full strength, it remains arrested and it remains dormant. The alcoholic remains alcoholic forever. They're just not drinking, and they just have changed their character, so where they're extremely unlikely to ever drink again. However, relapse happens, and the alcoholic or the addict who goes back for just one little wee sip, right? And it can send them right back out. Now, it's important to remember that when this happens, it makes the issue I'm going to mention is, it makes it stand out. But why does somebody want this? Why does somebody want it? A bowl of ice cream is very nice. I don't want to eat ice cream all day. I don't want to eat ice cream every day, right? Because then it just loses that. The alcoholic is not enjoying the taste of the liquor. The alcoholic is enjoying the buzz, the high. Now, pleasure is very nice, but when it's no longer pleasure, it's succeeding in only one thing. It's succeeding in numbing the person and taking away pain. Now, pain needs to be, if somebody's experiencing pain, they need to do something about it. If it's physical pain, either tolerate it or treat it. If it's chronic and it's long-term, then treating it with pain medication isn't the answer. And doctors all know this. So that they're not going to give you Percocet for the rest of your life. They're not going to do that. The alcoholic or the addict is not treating physical pain. They're treating psychic pain. They're treating emotional pain. And guess what? This isn't the answer. Emotional pain is not treated by numbing the brain. It's dealt with by addressing what the emotional problem is. Get a therapist, get the help, do the work that needs to be done. It's the wrong solution to the wrong problem. And what happens with relapse is that clearly the person who relapses is relapsing because whatever the underlying issue was in the first place, the treatment and the recovery work did not address some part of that problem. And it remained there. And at some later point in time, there was a weakening of the person's recovery program. They became vulnerable and they crossed that line. And that's where relapse comes from. And literally, those of us who worked in the field, when you would have somebody coming back for treatment the second and the third time, I don't have to collect the whole history. I got that in my file drawer. Or today you have it online. I don't need all that information. I got it already. I want to know where their program became weak, fewer meetings, not talking to their sponsor, not reading and writing the things that they need to do. And the other thing is, what are they hiding? What is the underlying issue that they were treating by trying to numb it chemically? So recognize that if I'm not an alcoholic, there are things about the alcoholic that I will not understand because I haven't lived it. So that it never dawned on me that I have to have a bottle hidden somewhere. The alcoholic has an emergency supply. The bottle is hidden somewhere in the house. It could be hidden in the laundry room. It could be hidden under piles of clothing, right? They've got an emergency supply somewhere, right? Drug addict, they've got emergency supplies. Why? Because that's the most important thing in their life. They've got to have their stuff, as they say it. They've got to have that stuff. Now, me as a non-alcoholic, I'm not going to think that way. Now, having worked with them, I learned to be able to recognize some of these things so that I can very often predict what some of their behaviors are likely to be. Not from personal experience, but from exposure to how many of them over several decades worth. You get to learn how they think. And it's sometimes very interesting because if you follow logical reasoning, okay, so there's, my father has this in his book on addictive thinking. Normal Aristotelian logic is all trees have leaves. This is a tree. Conclusion, therefore, this has leaves. The psychotic, the schizophrenic will say Socrates was a man. I am a man, therefore I am Socrates. Right? Now, that's psychotic thinking. The alcoholic would do something like all trees have leaves. This is a tree. Therefore, I need a drink. Now, we're sitting back and looking at this and we're cracking up laughing because it's absurd, right? It is. But the alcoholic is perfectly okay with that because they've got to have their stuff. And whatever words you're going to use that are going to provide an excuse for it, that's fine, as long as they get what they need to have. And now, where does that take you in a relationship? Right? I need to walk down the block. And if I'm passing a jewelry store to say, what can I buy for my wife? Or what would I like to buy for my wife if I had the money? Not necessarily to go in and do all the window shopping, but that has to be the way that I walk down the street and I think that way, right? If somebody's walking down the street and what's on their mind is, I got to get a drink, or I got to get some stuff. Where can I get a joint, right? If that's where they're thinking, there's no room in that character for a partner, for a companion, right? Okay, there's another nakuda that I want to touch on because I think that it's really important, and it's addressing something that is very likely to be less of a conscious issue and more of a subconscious issue. What motivates a young person to get married? Don't give me hormones. We get married, we want to settle down in life and establish a home and raise a family, etc., etc. There are other kinds of ideas that we have in our head that we may verbalize, we might not verbalize, but they play a very important role. And that is if we may all grow up with ideas of things that we want to accomplish in our lives. Now, whether that's career or it's social roles and et cetera, et cetera. I want to be popular. I don't want to be popular. I want to be alone. I want to be a kachlefel. We all have these ideas. There are many people who, when they marry, an unconscious motive behind their choice of partner is, I want somebody that I can fix. And they gravitate unconsciously. They may not even realize it. They may have no objective information to support this, that the other individual has something, has some defect, some flaw. And I'm going to marry them and I'm going to fix it. And I've seen this in both genders. There's men who marry women that they want to fix. There's women who marry men that they want to fix. And the fact that there's that there's an addiction which the other person may not even know about. They may have no knowledge of it whatsoever. They sense it in an unconscious way, and they wind up putting themselves into a situation with the belief that they can fix it. Now, there's various reasons about why people have such ideas altogether. That's going to be beyond our scope tonight. But be aware that we cannot fix other people. Now, about the only one of the helping professions that actually fixes people are surgeons, because they take a scalpel and they cut, and they're actually doing something that alters a part of the human body. That's actually fixing something, right? We're not in any other kind of medicine, we fix nothing. So that if somebody goes to the doctor and sore throat, doctor looks down, it's red, a culture, and here's antibiotic. The doctor didn't do anything. The doctor gave the patient the access to take the prescription, fill it, and then follow the directions of taking it, whatever, 1, 2, or 3 times a day. If the patient doesn't do that, it doesn't happen. But they went to the doctor, but the doctor didn't fix it. The doctor gave them the means for how they should do it. Yes, you need a doctor to get a prescription, but you still have to do your chelik up. So we don't fix other people. So again, outside of surgeons, right, that are doing this with various tools, they're altering the human body. Outside of that, we are in the position where we fix ourselves, and somebody gives us the guidance, the knowledge, the direction that this is how we can do it. If you're expecting to marry somebody and to fix them, or you're already married to somebody and you're expecting to fix them, don't. It won't work. You can't make somebody eat. You can entice them, but they're making the conscious decision that they want to eat. Right? You make food that's really delectable. It's appealing. Yeah, you can do that. So what happens is we're not truly fixing. Be aware of the motive and think into it. Is there something about this individual that I'm looking to fix? It really takes a lot of looking inward to be able to identify that. Now, there's still another question that comes up. There's a broader version of this question. When somebody has a particular issue and they're in the shidduch market, what do they disclose? Do you let them know before a boy and a girl meet? Do you let the other side know, hey, there's such and such an issue, right? Do you do it then? Very likely, no date is going to happen, right? We don't want to destroy the odds, right? When do you disclose information? When do you disclose information about mental illness or a history in the family of mental illness? We have all of these. These are complicated shilas that Rabbanim have been asked for many, many years. There is no simple consensus of how to answer that. So that I have heard Rabbanim say, by the third date, you have to say something. By the sixth date, you have to say something. You have to say something on the first date. And nobody's very clear about it. There is no one size that fits all. And Rabbanim are not unified in this. What I will tell you is that not to go to the point of engagement without disclosing is a trap, and everybody's going to suffer from it. Everybody's going to suffer. You're either going to have an engagement that's going to break, which is very painful for everybody, with all the complications that follow that. Sometimes the couple goes and gets married, and it's a very short time before the problems begin to rise to the surface. There are times in which the shalom bayis problems begin to take hold before anybody realizes that there was an addiction in the background. The question is, okay, so I'm dating this girl or this boy, and they disclose to me that there's an addiction going on. What am I going to do about it? And what I need to do is I need to get the kind of information that is going to enable me to make an educated decision. I want to know, am I dealing with somebody who's in recovery or someone who's not? And this is the description that I gave earlier. If somebody is in true, honest recovery, you will be able to see it. You don't need to be a professional. You'll see somebody who has the luxury of insight into their own character, and they do things in moderation. They don't beat themselves up. They're not boastful. They're concerned about other people, genuinely concerned. Let me explain be generally concerned for one brief moment. When you walk into your workplace and you're walking down the hall and somebody walks past you the other way, you may greet each other and say, "Good morning, how are you?" When somebody greets you and says, "Good morning, how are you?" what do you answer? Probably, "I'm fine, Baruch Hashem, how are you?" There was no question and there was no answer. These are social greetings, right? Like you say, "Good Shabbos, Good Yom Tov." You're just greeting somebody. How are you is not a question. When somebody is in recovery, when two recovering people meet and they ask each other, "How are you?" they are prepared to listen. Your workmate walking down the hallway, you try to tell them, I got a crick in my neck, I didn't sleep good last night, I have an itch behind my knee, and I got a headache. They don't want to know that. And they're not going to talk to you anymore, right? Whereas with recovering people, the care that they have for somebody else is true, honest caring. So be aware that people in recovery are very, very wonderful people. Now, caution. I'm just going to reflect on one particular individual. I remember I said this to him. It was quite many years ago. He was in treatment for 2 weeks. Serious addiction to cocaine and heroin and whatever, the chazara he got his hands on. And he started to go, we make him go to 12-step meetings. So he's going to one AA meeting and 3 NA meetings or whatever it was. And he's 2 weeks into this. And he comes in half an hour before group. And I'm talking to him. I'll call him John. I remember what his name was. John, how you doing this week? He was just, he just had a whole weekend. Oh, it was great. I went to a bunch of meetings. And so how's your recovery going? Oh, one day at a time, easy does it, live and let live. He's doing all these AA slogans. And I looked at the guy and I said, John, I really wish I was on an airplane now. He says, why? He says, so I told him, because there would be a barf bag within arm's reach. When I hear somebody throwing the slogans around, he hasn't been in a program long enough to know what they mean. And they're brilliant, but he had no idea. And all he's doing is just mouthing this off and trying to give me the impression that he's really indulging in recovery. Now, he's doing that the way that he did his drug, right? And I'm not interested in that. That's fake. So you do need to be aware that just mouthing things off is not even skin deep. It's basically like these tattoos that you used to lick them and stick them on your arm. How long for somebody to be sober should you begin to have an idea that they're safe? It's a very difficult thing to know that for sure, and there's a couple of reasons why. The main reason is that the quality of somebody's recovery is not determined by the calendar. Now, I'm going to qualify that, but for the most part, if somebody is sober a month, somebody's sober, if someone else is sober 10 years, I'm going to go with the 10-year person. What I would want to see is somebody who's been sober and has maintained the sobriety and active recovery. I don't mean just not drinking or not drugging. I want to know that they've not just been abstinent, but that they've been working on themselves and their recovery. And this I want to see for a chunk of time. I don't like numbers here because numbers don't tell the whole story. Having said that, I would want to know that they've got a couple of years behind them. And the reason is that we have a calendar, right? Whether you talk about our calendar or the secular calendar, you have all the different seasons of the year. You can call it seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall, but you can also call the seasons Pesach and Rosh Hashanah and summer going to the country and all the other things that fill our calendars. And when you look at that, you're seeing somebody who has gone through several cycles of these experiences with all of the ups and downs that are brought about, Yom Tov is family time, et cetera, et cetera. They've gone through all that and they've maintained their recovery throughout. So, what I want to see a couple of years in recovery, the answer is yes. Bear in mind that the kind of character change that we're talking about for somebody to be truly in recovery, it doesn't happen overnight. It is a process. Can somebody be there after 6 months? They could be. How likely is it? I'm not ready to bet on somebody who's sober 6 months. I really want to. I want to support them, and I want them to keep on working on themselves. But I'm not ready after 6 months to say, and I know they're serious, but I really want to see a little bit more experience under their belt. That despite all the other kinds of things that can be going on in their lives, that they've been able to maintain an active recovery life. So, is addiction healthy for marriage? The answer is absolutely no. Is it a safe bet to go with somebody who says, all right, I know, I always used to drink. I'm not going to drink anymore. Don't worry about it. And the answer, I don't take the verbal promises of an addict. They're about as valuable as the paper that they're written on. Your average addict has made hundreds and hundreds of promises, and they've had to make 100 promises. because they keep on breaking this, so they just have to keep on going. I don't count on them. I need to see the action where they're active in recovery, and this goes on over an extended period of time. That's when I know that I'm likely to be in healthy hands.
So thank you for all that. A question came in: can working on oneself without support, can someone really pull out of an addiction without enough support?
Support has two reasons for it. One is if I need support from somebody, they've got to be able to understand where I am, what kinds of experiences I might have, so that they can be truly supportive. If they don't know what I'm going through, they're going to have a very hard time giving the full range of support that I would desperately need. There's another thing. We can very, very easily be tricked by various kinds of defense mechanisms that the addict commonly uses. So there's the classic denial. Denial is like a chameleon that it takes many, many different forms, and pretty much all of them can be somehow labeled as denial. They shift responsibility and blame. They've got as many excuses as there's names in the Manhattan phone book. It's the benefit of having somebody as a support person who's similarly in recovery is that when I'm going to start to make my excuses and I'm going to start to patchka around with my recovery program, I'm going to get nailed because that person is going to recognize it. So I need them not just to be supportive, that they understand me, but I need them to catch me when I'm beginning to mess up. And that's something that you're not going to get from somebody who doesn't recognize. I have to share an incident that happened quite a number of years ago. We were living in Pittsburgh, and there was a fellow who, from father, husband, who who went into the treatment program in Pittsburgh, and he settled there. And he got a house, and he was living there. He brought his family, and he found work to do there. Prior to coming there for treatment, he had been in treatment once before, and on his anniversary, of being 1 year sober, he celebrated by getting high. So this time, when he finished the treatment here in Pittsburgh and he got sober, for his first anniversary of his sobriety, the anniversary party was at my parents' house, and it was completely sober. There wasn't a drop of alcohol to find anywhere, and there must have been 100 people in the house mulling around, and many of them were in recovery themselves, and many of these recovering people knew my parents' home, and they had been there for meals on Shabbos and Yom Tov. At one point, one of these recovering people goes upstairs to use the bathroom, comes downstairs and it's just giggling his head off. Didn't say a word. Somebody says, "What are you laughing about?" He says, "You've been here a while, go use the bathroom." And this second person goes upstairs, comes back down, giggling his head off. And this went on for about 8 people. And nobody said a word about why they were giggling. Now, I'm going to just turn to you, all the yous here in our Zoom room here, and ask you, what if you were an addict, even in recovery, and you're in somebody else's home, and you use the bathroom, what do you do before you leave? Before you open the door to walk out? And anybody who is not in recovery with an addiction history, nobody gets the answer. Now, unbeknownst to anybody else, I didn't even know about it, and I was there. My father took a piece of paper and wrote on a sign, "Some things never change," and he scotch taped it to the shelf inside the medicine cabinet. And every one of these recovering people discovered it, right? Because everybody did that. Like, hey, maybe there's something good in here. And they're in recovery. Some things never change. He knew how they thought from just how many years he's been working with them. And, if I'm in recovery, I need somebody to catch me when I start playing around with my recovery program. And that's a precious thing to have. So you really need to have a support person who knows it from experience being there. There's things that it would never dawn on you unless you've already been there.
That makes sense. Okay, last question. If someone shares about an addiction during dating, who to talk to about, and I imagine as young people, they don't really know how to make so much sense of it. So, and they also assume that they shouldn't be speaking to their own parents because that's maybe not, or should they be speaking to their parents? Or who could they reach out to? What kind of person to reach out to? Should they reach out to a therapist, to the person's sponsor, to like who?
Therapist and possibly sponsor. You have to recognize that there's going to be limits of what they're able to say. The individual who has the therapist and sponsor has to give them permission to disclose that information. If they won't allow them to share any information about them, they're looking to hide something. I would be very hesitant about moving forward with something like that.
I think it's wise not to share it with your parents unless they happen to be the therapist, because lay people don't fully understand it. I think addiction seems sometimes scarier, or like you said, like recovered addicts can be wonderful people, and some lay people may not understand.
Correct.
They hear the word addict and just throw out the whole idea.
Correct. And we always have to be aware, particularly anything that's mental health related, that the lay public has a very, very limited understanding of the subject matter, and that you just go to them and look. How many people will say, so and so had a nervous breakdown? You will not find a psychologist, psychiatrist, or professionally trained mental health professional who even knows what a nervous breakdown is. It's not a clinical term. There's no definition for it. You may find it in the Webster's dictionary or whatever, but it's not in any professional dictionary because there's no such term. Now, there are people who have had significant psychiatric episodes of whatever sort. Maybe that's what it's referring to. But there's a wide range of possible psychiatric episodes. So we have to be careful that your non-trained professional is your non-professional and untrained person is not going to have the kind of knowledge base to understand what the issues are.
And that said, sometimes just talking to your parents about what was shared is not wise anyway. If this does become a marriage, then your parents always looking out for these issues that you mentioned when you were dating is not always looking to find proof of something is not always wise. It's important to speak to somebody, but not necessarily always your parents are the best people for it.
And there's a very broad generalization about that, which has way too much truth. And that is that when a boy and a girl are meeting and dating, they're looking for something that they like about the other person. The parents are looking to the prospective son-in-law or daughter-in-law as what's wrong with them so I can nix them. And they're on the lookout for the red flags. The dating boy or girl is not looking out for the red flags. They're looking for what's good about the person. It's just an approach. Now, should we use dating coaches? I happen not to have had positive experiences with people who are dating coaches. But that does not mean I'm not gonna blacklist this new field of dating coaches, because there are some of them are probably very good. But you definitely would need somebody to be able to bounce things off and who's aware that there's a very big difference between looking for problems and looking for the milus. It's a very big difference, and that's, if we can't address them both, we're going to have a difficult time figuring out and making a healthy decision.
All right, thank you. Any final thoughts on the topic, just in general?
We've covered a lot. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other questions that can be asked. Questions do come up. This is not these are common things. We're dealing in a society that legitimizes, not just legalizes, use of drugs and alcohol. It's a perfectly okay thing to do, and there are those people who have used it safely, and don't get into any long-term issues with it. There are many that do, the statistics, whether it's 10% or 8% or whatever, these statistics don't help me, because if I'm meeting somebody, it's a 50-50 chance whether they're from these or those. So these are difficult situations, and we need to have people that we can turn to, who can help guide us. We're making life decisions here, and I don't want to pass up the ideal partner, and I don't want to get myself into a can of worms.
Definitely. All right, one more question just came in. Hold on, let me just see if there's any. Okay, so the question is about sex addiction, and we'll be talking about that on a totally different talk, but and look out for that. It'll be in the next couple of weeks. And we also have some material on our Adai Ad website. That's adaiad.org. And if anyone has any other questions or ideas for topics, please definitely reach out to us, because that's the whole goal of Adai Ad, is to help people do well in their relationships, whether it's dating and or the marriage. So thank you, Dr. Twerski. Thank you, Ruchama from Mask, for being part of this. And thank you all for joining us, and good night. Ruchama?
Yeah, and I want to say, if anybody needs a referral for a therapist, feel free to call the helpline 718-758-0400. Thank you both, Deborah and Dr. Twerski. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.